This is the Daily Tech News for February 6, 2014. I'm Tom Merritt. Joining me today, very happy to have Mr. Brian Brushwood, host of Scam School on the Discovery Network, the very brand new and very exciting Hacking the System for National Geographic, and Ding, some other podcast you might know. I don't know. He does.
See, that was the idea that you had, that you were going to gloss over cord killers, my new favorite activity every Monday with Tom Merritt. Dude, it's great to be here. Congrats on all the growth of DTNS.
Hey, thank you very much. No, cordkillers.com, one of my favorite shows too. I do it with Brian Brushwood every week. It's all about cutting the cord, watching video, doing stuff like that. But you might not be able to do that if Verizon goes and blocks your bandwidth. And are they doing that? There's been some accusations of that, and we brought Peter Bright, technology editor at Ars Technica, on the show to help us discuss what we actually know and don't know. Thanks for joining us, Peter.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let's start off with some headlines. Recode reports Sony announced it will sell its Vaio PC business to investment fund Japan Industrial Partners, JIP, by the end of March. In the meantime, Sony says it will cease planning, design, and development of PC products, and the spring 2014 line launch will be the last. Vaio owners will still get support. It'll either come from Sony or JIP. Sony will also make its TV division into a subsidiary and focus on high-end 4K models. All of this means about 5,000 jobs are going to get cut. And Gadget reports Sony is also shutting down its digital bookstore in the United States and Canada, transferring those customers to Kobo, the different ebook company, starting in late March. Sony did have some good news, announcing that they had a profitable third quarter, $23 billion in revenue, up 24% over the same time last year, mostly on the strength of the PS4. However, in a revised full-year forecast, Sony expects to lose $1.1 billion.
Man, I can't remember the last time I lost $1.1 billion.
I don't remember the last time you lost $1.1 billion either. We're going to talk a little bit about the fate of the PC market a little later on. The Next Web reports Google launched Chromebox for Meetings today. It's a video conferencing setup. Asus makes the hardware, which has 4 USB 3.0 ports, HDMI, DisplayPort++, and an Intel Core i7. You also get an HD camera, microphone speaker combo, and remote control. The distinguishing feature is a modified version of Chrome OS and Google Plus Hangouts that can connect to any device that has a Google Plus app, even works with your existing infrastructure through video and Uber Conference. The whole package costs $999, which includes a $250 yearly support fee, which you'd have to pay after the first year, though. It's available in the US today and more countries to follow soon. Also, Dell and HP will be producing their own versions. TechCrunch reports, and Graybix on our subreddit was quick to call out that Amazon has acquired Irvine, California game company Double Helix Games. They make Killer Instinct and Silent Hill Homecoming, among others. Amazon Game Studio already did exist in Irvine, working mostly to develop social games. Amazon and Double Helix have an event in Los Angeles on February 13th, and rumors have swirled that Amazon might launch a game console of its own. Wired reports Apple has removed the world's most popular Bitcoin wallet, Blockchain, from the iOS App Store. Apple told Blockchain CEO Nicholas Carey that Apple said in an email to Blockchain CEO Nicholas Carey that the app had been removed due to an unresolved issue. That's all they said. Blockchain had been the only Bitcoin wallet available to iOS users. They have removed other ones previously, like Coinbase. GigaOM reports that a company called Beep has unveiled its first hardware product, an audio adapter that can stream audio from the cloud to multiple speakers in your home, kind of like a Sonos. Currently only works with Pandora using the Cast button, the same one that you use to control a Chromecast. The company was co-founded by Daniel Conrad and Sean Lewis, who used to work for Google's Android team, so I guess that Chromecast hijacking makes sense. The device itself is a copper click wheel with LEDs to show you the volume. You can turn that to turn things up and down. Beep is scheduled to start shipping in the autumn, and at that point, it will retail for $149, though you can pre-order it for a limited time at $99.
Man, that thing looks slick, by the way. If you see the photo, it looks a little bit steampunk in the future.
I was just going to say the same thing. It's very steampunk looking. Urs Holtzel, Google's first chief engineer, posted a reminiscence to Google Plus about the first time Larry Page took him to the Google data center on February 1st, 1999. The post has captured the sentimental hearts of geeks and sysadmins all across the internet. At the time, Google's data center was a 7 by 4 feet cage with 30 PCs on shelves in the Exodus data center in Santa Clara, California. It was right next to eBay, not too far from Altavista. I imagine they were glaring at Google the whole time. They even included in the post an invoice from 1998, which showed a megabit costing $1,200 a month, and they had to buy two. So they didn't max it out, Holtzel said, until the summer of 1999.
Wow.
News from you. This is stuff that you posted in our subreddit at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. Webatube posted a GigaOM article about an attack on an electrical substation near San Jose, California. Wall Street Journal reports snipers fired on this substation for almost 20 minutes, knocking out 17 transformers, as well as cutting nearby telephone cables. The damage took a month to repair, and the attackers and their motives are still unknown. It happened about 6 months ago.
This is like the equivalent of jerk kids with BB guns, just shooting something up for grins, huh?
Yeah, except snipers taking out 17 transformers with their jerked up BB guns. It's no cyber security necessary in this one. You just come at it.
Just security.
Yeah. Habituela Condolce and JMZ668 on our subreddit, as well as Jose Gomez by email, all sent us various links to the story of Dennis Abo Sorensen, who Live Science reports lost his hand as a result of a fireworks accident, but now has a prosthetic hand that has a sense of touch. Electrodes are embedded in Sorensen's arm that communicate with touch sensors in the prosthetic and then deliver impulses to his remaining nerves. He can tell the difference between objects by feel, according to the study, which is detailed in the journal Science Translational Medicine. Silvestro Misera, a neural engineer at the Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna in Italy and Swiss Federal Institute of Technology Lausanne in Switzerland, led the team that developed the hand.
That's insane.
Yeah, that is a big advance.
I would imagine it's kind of like those cochlear implants where it just takes a while for you to readjust your brain to the new sensations.
Yeah, it's interesting to read his experiences in interpreting the signals, but he's able to control the pressure that he's giving to the prosthetic hand. That itself was a huge advance not that long ago. And now by touch, he can feel like, oh, that's something I shouldn't squeeze too hard.
Wow.
McFads23, who also happens to be our producer, Jenny, submitted this PSFK article on subreddit, but people voted for it. It's about Changefolio, which is at changeful.io. It's a platform that makes it easy to donate money to charities. The service connects with a user's bank, then lets the user pick a charity from then on. Purchases can be rounded up, or you can ask for a certain percentage to be taken out automatically and then donated as microtransactions. So, for example, you have the service take 2% of your grocery bill, say, every time. Donate it to a food bank, that kind of thing. And of course, they have all kinds of graphs and charts and the ability to post your achievements to Facebook and Twitter if you want to brag about your charity. And that, my friends, is a look at the headlines. Before we get into our discussion, a quick plug for the Morning Stream Patreon. Oh, you thought I was going to talk about my Patreon. Patreon.com/TMS. My friend Scott Johnson on the Morning Stream has started a Patreon to support his show. So if you have an extra nickel or so, go throw it Scott's way. Of course, we are doing a very successful Patreon here, and I want to thank everybody who's contributed more than $6,600 from 2,127 patrons or patronesses. We haven't figured that out, but you are patroni in our eyes. You're all awesome. Thank you.
You are our patronus. How about that?
You are. We did not expecto such patronus. Patronum. Anyway, patreon.com, search for Tom if you'd like to support the show. If you haven't already, we're asking just a nickel a show. If you can do that, that's $1 a month. Really appreciate the support. All right, Peter, let's get down to what's happening with David Raphael and iScan Online. They noticed some slowdown both at work at iScan Online and at David Raphael's home. They were getting 40 kilobytes per second at home when they were connecting to S3, but they were fine. They were getting their full 75 megabits per second for everything else. And then he talked to a support person, right?
Yeah. And he asked, I think he was frustrated with the support person, as many people get frustrated with support people. And he said, hey, something's slowing this down. Is Verizon deliberately making this service worse?
Yeah, he posted a screenshot of the chat, and he says, is Verizon now limiting bandwidth to cloud providers like Amazon's AWS service? And the frustrated support person says, yes, it is limited bandwidth to cloud providers. Sounds like he's just mirroring back. So that's the smoking gun. On the other hand, he also put some trace routes up where he shows that Verizon servers were getting slammed as well. And he has a trace route both from work and from home. How much of a smoking gun is that?
That's not a smoking gun at all. So here's the thing. Verizon could be doing this. Verizon says they're not, but they could. The technology is there. Verizon wants to do this. We know because they're the ones who went to court to fight net neutrality. But it's actually really difficult to tell the difference between Verizon is slowing down traffic to Netflix and Verizon's connection to Netflix is just congested. And that's why net neutrality is a very difficult thing, because if Verizon doesn't want to buy more bandwidth to Netflix, and over the past 6 months there have been reports of various conflicts between these companies over who should pay and how much should be paid. If Verizon doesn't want to pay and Netflix won't pay, then the connection will be slow and your Netflix experience will be horrible. But that's okay, because that's still neutral.
Right.
Whereas if Verizon is actually buying lots of bandwidth and then slowing it down artificially, before that wouldn't be okay because that would be non-neutral, but now it could probably be okay anyway. But Verizon doesn't have to slow it down sort of with filtering.
That's the thing. If they're failing to maintain the connection at the full site, and you know,
and there was in fact a situation where Comcast and Netflix had some back and forth about just that thing, where they were like, "You're failing to add interconnects here."
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the question is, is that the same as intentionally slowing down? Failing to get it up to speed seems to be, from a practical standpoint, the same as intentionally slowing it down.
Yeah, but it costs money to get it up to speed. I think Verizon could make the case that they're just being hands off and not doing anything. Okay, they're not helping the situation, but they're not doing anything to actively harm it.
Right. Verizon says we treat all traffic equally, and that has not changed. That would fit that scenario where they're like, we're still treating it equally. When all the kids come home from school at 4 p.m., which is, by the way, when Raphael says he sees the slowdown after 4 p.m., he's like, Verizon can say, like, it's not our fault that they all get on and start streaming on Twitch.
Yeah.
It's just what happens.
Yeah, and I guess also I don't even blame, and I feel weird even saying this, but I don't even blame Verizon for trying to get Netflix to be the one to pay for the peering services, because, you know, Netflix does take up as much as a third of all traffic, of all bandwidth, and they certainly seem to be doing well in their financial statements. So you would think, you know, why not try to get them to cover to the maintenance and upkeep over there?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Netflix would say, hey, but Verizon customers are paying to access the internet. We're part of the internet. You've got to, you know, put in the network plumbing required to access our services.
Well, Netflix,
so I think both sides have a point.
Yeah, Netflix's Reed Hastings has said, we provide value to your customers. One of the reasons they spend money on your ISP is because they can access things on the internet like us. So it's not in your best interest to block those sorts of things, unless, like Verizon, you operate a competing service like, oh, I don't know, Verizon Redbox Instant that you would like to push them to. For me, it comes down to the market can decide if they want to use Verizon or not if Verizon ended up blocking something like Netflix. And go to somewhere else that didn't. But the problem is we don't always have that amount of choice.
Yeah, and that's certainly the case now. I'm still optimistic that we're going to see more options. You know, here in we've talked before on Cord Killers about how some people are giving up the internet bill altogether because between mobile and work they're able to get all the internet access that they need. So hopefully it'll be the kind of thing where we'll all have enough options where we can go to the provider that that gives the best options. But I know a lot of people have only one choice, and that's a real bummer right now. But I suspect that's getting better.
Now, Peter, before we let you go, I want to point out that Raphael is bringing up Netflix because the support person responded to a leading question. He says, is this why my Netflix quality is also bad now? Yes, exactly, is what the support person says. Verizon says that that's not the case. Then there's those trace routes, which could equally be explained by just a lot of congestion on that interconnect. Right. And they're, you know, like you say, Verizon not doing anything actively to block it. If we were to see evidence of Netflix actually doing something to degrade a particular services, whether it was Amazon Web Service or Netflix, what would we have to see?
That's one of the things that's really difficult, because from our end user perspective, it all looks very similar. If Netflix continued to be awful even at off-peak times, that might be suggestive. But even that we can't tell because it could be some problem just within Verizon's network. What we really need is for these ISPs to be much more open and transparent about what they're doing and how they're operating. And if they did that, then maybe the non-neutrality wouldn't be such a concern, because we would be able to, it's again the competition thing. If Verizon says we're doing this, this, and this, Comcast said, well, we're not doing that, but we are doing this, and you could compare and say, well, actually, I don't use that service, so I don't mind that Verizon is pushing their own and deprioritizing. Then that would be okay, because we could make the decision, and yeah, we might go for a service where everything is treated equally, but there might be reasons not to. But that requires the ISPs to actually be really forthcoming and open, and that's something that they're consistently not.
Yeah, that would be a change in their behavior, and one should not expect dramatic shifts in personality, even from corporations. It would be a sign of something wrong, actually. There's a website that's been started called netneutralitytest.com. If people are interested in participating, what this does is just it tests your bandwidth with certain types of pings and trace routes and this and that, and then it's trying to collect all that data. Do you think that could force some kind of transparency?
I've taken a look at that, and already some critiques of its methodology have been posted by experts in this area. I think it's a nice idea. I'm not sure it can still tell us enough to really diagnose the problem.
Right. Well, Peter, if nothing else, the fact that this got so much attention in certain quarters and it was linked and blogged all over the internet tells me that at least people are watching like a hawk, even if the ISPs aren't going to be transparent. So we will have people talking about this, even if we have some potentially false positives like this. Appreciate you coming on and helping us to understand this a little better.
Thank you.
Peter Bright is technology editor at Ars Technica, arstechnica.com. He does great stuff over there, so you can find him there. And his Twitter handle is, what is Dr. Pizza? Is that your Twitter handle?
Dr. Pizza, yeah.
Where'd that come from?
During my, it's really boring. During my very brief stint at university, I use IRC a lot. And on the network I couldn't have like a long name. So I was normally P2B, but whenever I was away from the keyboard, I was normally eating a pizza. So I was Pizza B for when I was away eating pizzas.
Gotcha.
And it got Doctor stuck on it somehow. So
you elevated your pizza.
Yes, I gave myself a promotion and a PhD, and because I got pretty expert at eating pizzas. So I felt I'd earned it.
Hey, something to be proud of. Hey, and in all seriousness, thanks for coming on and joining us, Peter. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
All right, Brian Brushwood, we heard all the mostly bad news about Sony. They're getting rid of their VAIO PC. Don't forget, there's other indications of the death of the PC market out there. Apple bragging that Mac shipments are declining at a slower rate than the rest of the PC market. That's their brag. We're declining slower. HP shaking things up at the executive level, obviously trying to find other things than the PC to succeed on. Dell going private to avoid shareholder pressure. Sony has even had their credit downgraded. They say they're aiming for stable profit beginning in the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2015. So the first thing they're jettisoning, that PC business. How do you think the PC business is dead? And if so, how dead?
No, like anytime you proclaim anything dead, I would just like to remind you how many people are very much into vinyl records, and nothing really dies, does it? And especially the PC, there will never be a time. That's well, yeah.
I mean, that's the exception that proves the rule, right? Because yeah, LP is still around.
Well, and the problem is like, you know, there are unique advantages to an LP where it's, you know, but the analog fidelity is of a certain precision that some people swear, and I guess you could make a case that if it's properly maintained, it actually is better than you know, CD where you have a limited bit rate. But anyway, there are certain things that you absolutely will never be able to do with a tablet to the ability that a PC has. You know, certainly, you know, WASD gaming, high-end gaming, or you know, Photoshop or editing, video editing. I don't ever see going into a video editing bay and seeing somebody reclining back with an iPad doing their professional editing. And you know, right here in this studio, as we make improvements for cord killers, you know, the solution for us was to buy a third PC, and there are things that PCs are built to do. Now, whether or not everybody needs those is a different question. And I assume that when we're talking about PCs, we're talking about both desktops and laptops. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it's funny that you say that because PCs can sometimes include tablet sales numbers, and so that muddies it. But yes, I think desktops and laptops are the product categories most people talk about when they're talking about the death of the PC. Desktops especially, but really both.
You know, and let's go the flip side. Would a Chromebook count as a PC sale in that it certainly exists to fill that same role, but really is just a mobile device?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not a tablet, if it's, you know, the clamshell thing, then yeah, and the Chrome box certainly would, right? That new video conferencing Chrome device from Asus that I mentioned in the headlines, that's also a PC. I think that's where your LP analogy gets really good, is that what the LP has is suited to a purpose. If I'm a DJ or I want a full fidelity flavor or I want a certain thing out of music, the LP is best suited for that. Mobile, no. You know, I'm going to put MP3s on a phone if I want to be mobile. I'm not going to carry around a long playing record thing. It's almost exactly the same thing. Yeah, for mobile, I can do some stuff. It may not be as good, but I get the advantage of being mobile. But if I really have a suited purpose, I want to do high quality video conferencing. I want to play great video games. I want to do editing. You know, I want to crunch a ton of numbers. I've got some real intense programming, data that needs to be mined. I want to mine some Bitcoins. I need a desktop for all that stuff.
Well, and keep in mind also, that's also on the personal side. As far as enterprise solutions, if you're somebody who has, let's say, shortly after 2000, switched over to a system where essentially every single PC is just a dumb terminal that is able to access stuff, you can go decades, literal decades, before you need to upgrade any of that infrastructure. And I think for a long time we saw a lot of people upgrading their systems to Windows XP, but then that's why we're still dealing with the support for Windows XP a billion years after it was supposed to end. And it makes sense that demand should diminish as we all make that upgrade, and then we recognize certain tasks do require, you will always want the fastest, highest end processor for your graphic capabilities. But I'll tell you this much, it's leveled off. Like as a hardcore PC gamer, you know, once you're able to run 1080p at 70, 100 frames per second, it's like pretty much the games scale and you get a diminishing return. So it makes sense to me that PC sales would be tapering off and that the competition would be winding down. And it makes sense that the heat would all be in mobile. But, you know, I'm not a fan of proclaiming anything dead.
No, me either. I think it's just, it's maturing, right? And it's getting into its niche, so to speak. All right, real quick look at the calendar. Happy anniversary to Colossus, which 70 years ago, the Mark I Colossus was turned on to help break codes from the Nazis in the fight for World War II. That's an old computer.
Wow.
So happy anniversary to that. The Mark II, which was actually the faster and more successful one, didn't go online until June 1st, around D-Day. Google confirms it's going to shut down its goal-sharing service Schemer tomorrow, February 7th. If you've been using Schemer, you won't be after tomorrow. And the Sony PlayStation Vita Slim is headed to the UK tomorrow. It's going to cost you £180. Our pick of the day lately has been coming from me, but Brian Bartolini said, hey, I think you should plug Current Geek. So I'm gonna. CurrentGeek.com is a weekly show that I do with Mr. Scott Johnson. We cover all of the greatest things in the world and talk about them, and they're fun and amazing, and it's all geeky stuff. So we will talk about probably Satya Nadella. We may talk about some kind of weird website that's showing you, like, for one thing, is the original versions of websites, all kinds of cool stuff like that. If you're into geeky things from technology to comic books to movies, especially if you're a fan of the Frog Pants Network, check it out, currentgeek.com. Let's look at some messages of the day. Charles, a.k.a. Geezer in the chat room, wrote, Radio Shack is missing the opportunity to get into the maker movement. They should change their name to Hacker Shack or Maker Shack and go back to focusing on selling parts of DIY kits, he says. Reminds me of the myopia of Sears when they killed off their venerable catalog just as internet shopping took off. You know, that is a really good idea, and probably an idea that maybe Radio Shack is just going to find it too hard institutionally to run with. But the idea of making a makerspace / product store really fits. It fits with that idea of coffee shops being places that can sell books and magazines and that sort of thing. I'd be interested to see if somebody would try that. Even if it's not Radio Shack, I'd love to see somebody try that. Olyeg wrote in and said, using torrents for distribution of scientific data in journals is a great idea. We talked about this on yesterday's show, but let's face it, data sets are only getting bigger. All the universities I've worked at so far explicitly prohibit use of torrents or block them on the campus network. It may change if this method of distribution will get traction and get support of big organizations like the National Institute of Health in my field that currently host a lot of data on their servers. Good perspective on that, Dr. Oleg. He's a PhD, he says in his email. So that's something that you're going to have to get the universities to loosen up about because torrents don't mean, I mean, we've said it for years and people think we're just joking. Torrents don't mean illegal. They may be majorly used for illegal these days, but they don't necessarily equate to legal. Linux ISOs is always the joke, but Linux ISOs are legal and used by torrent. Of course, the BitTorrent organization believes this as well. And finally, got this from Derek Chen, who he sent us a YouTube video, and we don't have a way to play that into the video version of this yet. We're really focusing on the audio version. But Derek's got some perspective on what's going on in advertising on the internet. We were talking about this with Amber Mack yesterday.
Hey, Tom. Wanted to chime in on advertising. I think it's a bit tricky in trying to compare TV to online video. Television, for the most part, is premium, curated, long-form content. Yes, there are hundreds of channels, but the majority of what's watched falls in a relatively small group of shows, channels, etc. Part of this is reflected on online video, but guess what? The CPMs are just as high. The difference is, premium long-form video only makes up a small portion of what's online, especially what runs off of ad dollars. The vast majority of online videos falls to countless creators, producers, and so forth, most of which individually lack in the reach that TV offers. So even though we're talking about a much bigger pie, there's exponentially more slices being cut out of it. When it comes to online, we don't usually buy individual creators or shows. Instead, we buy through networks that usually focusing on more of a individual target or audience that we're looking at. And as video networks group all of this inventory, we don't buy off a CPM, but we actually look more towards cost per view, cost per completed view, and so forth. So just wanted to chime in on online video. Love the show.
Thanks, Derek. No, that makes a lot more sense then, which is your average CPMs are lower because there's just a lot more places out there. But high CPMs do in fact exist. It's harder for them to stand out in a world that has an infinite number of choices, essentially. Derek's always good with those kinds of insights, so appreciate that. Well, we had a little internet difficulty. The chat room was speculating that maybe it was Verizon actually cutting off my bandwidth, but the audio version of this kept going. We'll see if the video version kept going as well. I want to thank Brian Brushwood for joining me, and while he's not here to defend himself, I want to tell you to watch Hacking the System, end of February, National Geo. I'm really excited that he's got this show going, and so look it up. Find the National Geographic channel. Tell your friends, Hacking the System. It's going to be a great show. And also check out Scam School and shop at Scam Stuff and do all of the things to help Brian because he's a great guy. And I appreciate it. Thanks again to Peter Bright for joining us as well. Don't forget, you can have a voice in what stories we cover at our subreddit, dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. You can send us emails. Email us at feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. Call us, 512-59-DAILY. That's 512-593-2459. And visit our website, dailytechnewsshow.com. We'll be back tomorrow with Darren Kitchen as my guest. I think Len Peralta is going to be illustrating as well. We will see you then.
Studios Network. For more information about this and other shows, visit frogpants.com. Audio program so good, it's like you're there.